Welcome back, everyone, to RoomPack's ResEdChat podcast. Every other week, we feature a variety of topics of interest to hired professionals who work in and with university housing. So as time goes on, I think we recognize new different topics that we want to talk about. And this episode will be kind of a 101 crash course on living and learning communities, LLCs. Obviously, they're a big part of sort of a lot of residence life, residential education programs. And we're going to give them their sort of respect and sort of dive in with them. So just we'll cover as much as we can in this episode, and I'm sure we'll go into more even deeper dives in the future to talk about different shapes and forms that LLCs can take. But we have with us somebody who has a lot of experience in this space, Chester Miller, and you have a very unique professional background, which I'm excited to explore in addition to talking all about LLCs. But if you do want to give kind of a brief overview of your professional background and what led you to be where you are today.
Dustin, thank you so much for having me. Good morning. My name is Chester Miller. I serve as Director for Residential Learning at North Carolina State University here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I have over 20 plus years of experience in higher education, specifically within housing, and a unique background where I spent some time in private industry working at IBM here in Research Triangle Park. I started my career at North Carolina A&T, so I have the small, historically Black college and university experience where I began working in housing, as well as started a PhD program in computer and electrical engineering. I did not finish that program because I discovered my love for working with students outside of the classroom, particularly helping North Carolina A&T State University formalize their living learning program there, working specifically with the first year engineering students. And that's where I got my love for working with students outside of the classroom. It was an impactful experience for me. And from there, I spent roughly 5 years at North Carolina A&T, and a position opened up here at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, and I've been here ever since. So coming up in August of this year, I will have served here at North Carolina State for 17 years, all in housing. First working on the Res Life side, supporting students in the community as an assistant director for our apartments community, working tangentially with our living learning programs back then. After a housing program review in 2016, an external review of our program, we created a position as Director of Living and Learning Initiatives in 2017. And I was fortunate enough to transition into that role where I've spent the last 8 years, if you will, formalizing and standardizing our practices, looking at best practices across the country when it comes to implementing and executing living learning programs, collaborating with campus partners. And where I am today, my position has evolved to residential learning. So not just focused on living learning communities, even though that is the lion's share of my work. Also oversee our curriculum, our residential curriculum here at NC State, as well as recruitment, selection, training, assessment, and student leadership. So a host of things that I oversee at the campus, but obviously my love for living learning communities is deep within my desire and passion for working with students. So.
Yeah, and I've always kind of had a fascination or, just kind of a respect for the premise of a living learning community, of like how that sort of can really amplify the potential of, students living on campus. There's a lot of just kind of known benefits of that, just, as it is. But then if it's like, okay, let's take that and put a little bit more intentionality on that. I know we've talked a lot about sort of residential curriculums, and, I feel like LLCs are maybe sort of a precursor to that, or sort of helped kind of have that wave sort of kind of rise up. But if somebody is not familiar, and maybe if even acknowledging over, your career, how you've kind of seen what an LLC is and how it's sort of maybe changed, like, how would you define a living learning community today to somebody who is like, oh, I don't know what that is?
So living learning communities, they bring together students who share similar academic interests, passions, identities, and values. they're designed to integrate the curricular and co-curricular experience. So, students who are taking classes together live together and they learn together, not just in the classroom, but outside of the classroom. So those experiences are integrated. Students are able to make meaning of what they're learning in the classroom and actually apply their learning outside of the classroom in intentionally designed experiences. They allow students to develop deep bonding relationships with their peers, faculty, and staff, that implement and execute the living learning experience on a day-to-day basis. They help our students cultivate a sense of belonging and connectedness to the institution. And I think increasingly a focus on our living learning communities have to be on well-being, as well as helping to promote learning. When you think about the larger context of institutions focusing on student success, um, and when these experiences are thoughtfully done, our students, they grow, they thrive, they persist, and they graduate together.
Yeah, I feel like these things kind of like they could like happen by accident or sort of like, students could sort of stumble into it, but it's really important, I think, if you can build up a very robust offering of, certainly people need to kind of opt into these to, I think, really reap the kind of full benefits. So it's not as if it's like, any of these things cannot happen unless you are organizing LLCs, but I think they're more likely to happen. You may be measuring them and kind of quantify it and sort of ensure it a little bit. So do you think that like I said, like LLCs, I feel like I've, I guess my brief career, like I've been, around for this past decade, and I feel like, they were pretty well established at that time. Do you feel like evolution of like, the residential experience versus just like, oh, people are living together, they're going to classes together and all that. Like we're kind of putting more intentionality behind it. Like, do you feel like that's been kind of a trend line that like it's been sort of growing more and sort of, becoming more common?
I believe that the trend for living learning communities have become more prevalent in a residential environment because of the impact that they have on student success. I think all of the data shows that when students participate in these programs, they yield positive student outcomes, not just for the student, but the institution. When you think about 4-year, 6-year graduation rates, our students' ability to persist, and I think increasingly institutions of higher learning are being evaluated on their ability, to meet and sort of substantiate their existence by their ability to prepare students for what happens after they leave the institution. And I think living learning communities allow and sort of sit at the foundation to kind of help students not just transition into the institution, but also help the students really think about their trajectory as they navigate through the college experience. And so the intentionality and the structure of the program, the peer mentoring and interaction with upper class student leaders who are trained, whether they're resident advisors or peer mentors, the intentional opportunity to interact with faculty over time. What literature has shown is that students are challenged with connecting with faculty in general in the classroom. But when you integrate the ability of faculty to build relationships with students outside of the classroom, it helps to kind of humanize our faculty, and it enables students to kind of see them in a more welcoming light, for lack of a better term. And I think increasingly, what you're seeing that as the data shows, and there is more assessment done, it's not just anecdotal evidence that people are starting to seeing. There's more intentionality that folks are able to kind of tie causality to being a part of the living learning community, to positive student success outcomes, whether it's GPA. These experiences tend to be the gateway to additional high impact experiences on campus, whether it's undergraduate research, study abroad experiences, internships, co ops, and the like. Um, in talking to students, or again looking at the data, these experiences tend to be the gateways that catapult students to other experiences that sort of hone in and bring into focus what their long-term goals and aspirations are.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, there's so much about what an LLC is that I think in and of itself, like, kind of enables what we know are really important parts of a college experience, of sort of like peer-to-peer community and sort of, uh, you know, certainly, yeah, like faculty connections and different things like that. And uh, yeah, that it would sort of build someone's confidence or sort of willingness or interest in sort of furthering that, I guess, versus maybe kind of starting from zero. It's like, oh, well, you're living, where you live, which is like much of your time in college, like is already sort of integrated with everything else versus feeling like separate, which is like kind of weird to say, like on campus housing can feel separate because it's like, I don't know, I think like in its most basic form, it's like it is kind of like its own little hub, when it's just like, oh, you're just living in the building, we're keeping the building running, and there's just like the community in that building that feels sort of disjointed perhaps from the rest of the campus community and then from your classes and all that. And it's like, and that can be well and good, but I think at least offering for somebody who does have like a really specific interest or some sort of shared identity and those sort of things, like I think uh there's certainly the folks who would opt into those things, uh I think are probably more likely to get a lot out of them. But hopefully just be able to, like you said, like over time we'd be able to kind of make the case for them, I think, much easier and in a much more kind of compelling way, to continue to sort of uh, expand those and kind of create more different kind of LLCs and sort of just justify, I guess, sort of their existence. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just so much of like that idea of, like I said, like it's just a really good way to amplify and sort of maximize the potential of like the students' living experience, because it could be like, well, I've got a lot of good friends like on my floor and in my hall and all that, but it's like we have none of the same classes together, like we have none of, like, it's just all sort of like the randomness of it. But it's like there can be like sort of a beauty and a magic in that. But when you put a little bit of like structure and try to at least like remove some of the friction, um I would feel like this will be kind of, I guess, a brief follow up for you. Is like, I would think an LLC, whatever focus or sort of, structure it has, would be especially helpful for a first generation student to kind of navigate things. Cause I think if somebody kind of understands like all the sort of things that you're supposed to do to get the most out of college, like, they could live just in any building anywhere and, maybe be pretty well off. But if you're coming in and kind of starting from scratch, it's like it'd be great if you had a bunch of people that lived on your floor that are also in the same classes, and that there's a like live-in faculty member who you could like interact with, that you don't have to like, you know, kind of jump through as many hurdles or, whatever. So I guess just your take on that, of like, for that population in particular of first generation students, do you feel like an LLC, I think, would be especially helpful for them to navigate an institution?
My short answer is yes. But obviously, I would say specifically for this population, the thoughtfulness, by which it's created, right? First in college students, um, you know, they have not really experienced, well, at, just like all freshmen being admitted to the university, it's just a special experience for them, because often the connection with anyone who has particularly their parents have not had a college experience, and so it's more important, I think, for this population, that ease and transition to college life, and what that can look like. And so being a part of a living learning community can help make the college campus seem small. It helps to connect those students to resources. All of these things are organic to the living learning experience. As I mentioned, whether it's the staff and peer mentoring that happens, being a part of these programs, these residential programs, it really helps the student feel grounded and feel connected to the institution, and really begin to help them focus and organize in a pretty clear way fairly quickly, sort of how to navigate campus and the college experience. Those those avenues of engagement or involvement, uh, whether it's taking classes and faculty, what faculty members to take for your class, or um, the wide array of experiences that are offered from the Living Learning Community Program. Those activities really help students to sort of open their mind to the possibilities of what the college experience can be for them moving forward. And as I mentioned earlier, in terms of living learning communities sort of serving as a gateway to other experiences, I've talked to students in many settings, particularly in focus groups, where first generation college students have told me specifically that being a part of a living learning community and connecting with their peers and having a relationship with peer mentors has really helped them thrive in not just in the community, but um, at the campus as well. They've been able to develop a really tight knit support system, and they've experienced. They have similar backgrounds. If they're if there's a specific living learning community focused on first gen students, obviously they have similar backgrounds and experiences and can kind of navigate, uh, you know, attending classes as a cohort together, and sort of um, letting those experiences lead them to a particular pathway that they may be interested in long, to kind of satisfy their long-term goals. But no matter the living learning community experience, particularly for first-gen students, I think it really helps them um, sort of establish themselves and really feel a part of the institution. Again, and it really not just benefits the students, it benefits the institutions because we're able to retain them when they have that sense of belonging and feel connected to the institution and sort of understand, if you will, their compass for navigating the college experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important that you would have that sort of catch point for that. Like the idea of like where you live. It's a bunch of peers who are going along this journey with you, and whether they're first gen, themselves or not, like just that sort of like support network and helping with sort of the well being and just the compass, I guess, being a good metaphor of like helping them navigate things and just be much more in a place where they are set up for success, and certainly still on them to manage their time and get their assignments done and do them well and all that. But I think just trying to account for as much as possible. I think anybody uh, in this moment for higher ed would certainly appreciate like kind of that idea of like I feel like we're sort of exhausting all options for these students and giving them as much as we can to support them. um so this could be obviously, we'll try to keep this as brief as possible, but the idea of like, anybody listening, if they're looking to get started with LLCs or expand or evolve their current offerings, like just, I guess, perspectives on that, I guess, if it feels like it, I'm sure for some folks might feel very like daunting or something. So any sort of reassurances or, we'll certainly get into like, advice and resources and stuff, just whatever kind of comes to mind, I guess, to help folks either, start LLCs or sort of expand or evolve their current offerings.
Yeah, and that's a great question and a very important one. I think first and foremost, depending on your campus institutional culture and structure for living learning programs, I would imagine that there is some sort of um, process for establishing living learning communities, and if not, there should be a formalized process, whether it's a sunrise process or a sunset process for establishing living learning communities on your campus. And it's also important to note, Dustin, that these programs cannot be created in a vacuum. You know, uh, there are best practices for establishing living learning communities. Certainly encourage folks to take advantage of the resources that are available that sort of grounds the formulation of living learning communities in a best practice. And when done well, what these programs, should include. Most important of that. most important in the creation and establishing of LLCs are your partnerships, partnerships across campus. And so, assuming that you do have a sunrise process, there is a pretty detailed and lengthy timeline, again, depending on the structure of your campus and the campus partners involved for establishing them. Defining a timeline, when you begin those conversations, how does that align with department and institutional goals? And just beginning there as a starting point, and thinking about the overarching program. If you have a strategic plan, how does um, how does creating or establishing an LLC program fit within that? um, and it's also important to kind of look at the resources that are involved, whether it's staffing, financial, or the physical space. All three are critically important. I can't highlight one more than the other, but also, what is the purpose of the LLC? What population will it serve? What are your outcomes and objectives that you're trying to achieve? And is this the right thing for your campus or for the students? And most important of that as well, I think students need to be involved in this process in some way. If students are expressing a need that could lend, or could directly tie into establishing an LLC, making sure that is also integrated into your process. I would encourage folks to understand what the best practices are. Again, there are a lot of resources out there on the web. I actually just purchased and received the follow-on book to Karen Inkless, Living Learning Communities in Practice, that was just released. So I'm starting to read that as well to see what updates um, have been made to the best practices model that was shared in the first version of the book. So it's important to align best practices with whatever you're doing on your campus, within your institutional structure and context. Make sure that there are a core group of folks on your campus that are involved in the process. Again, LLCs cannot be created in a vacuum, nor can they be sustained in a vacuum. It takes a village to run these and to do them well. And you will see that very quickly, if students, many times these are opt-in experiences. So if students can't determine the value or the benefit of being a part of the community, they will not opt in. And if you are not living up to what you promised them in the experience, they will opt out. I've seen it time and time again. So, making sure that as part of your practice, you are assessing the impact of the experience, and using that to improve, that cycle of assessment, where there's continuous improvement involved in the process to ensure that you're doing everything to meet students' needs, and you are adjusting as needed, based on institutional changes, political changes, and students' needs. We have to constantly evolve. We have to constantly evolve every year, just to ensure that we are developing an experience that our students want and need.
Yeah, I think it's so crucial what you're kind of saying of like building that kind of coalition, fellow faculty and staff and everything, but certainly also having students as part of that. Because I think it could be whether you're starting from nothing or trying to kind of evolve and expand to kind of better meet student preferences, like, just kind of, doing surveys, kind of gauging interest and like, really getting, uh, you know, pretty substantial student input to know, like, we want more of this, less of that. Like, we'd rather have, these kind of communities or those sort of things. And, knowing who might be, able to serve as like peer mentors or interested in that sort of thing. Like, as much sort of preparation to show that you've put a lot of thoughtfulness into it is important. And yeah, because that would be the ultimate tragedy, is if you do a lot of work and then you're like offering it in a new, academic year and no students sign up. Like, it has to, like, that has to be, a part of the equation here. And I think, uh, you can't just base things on sort of like your thoughts or what you assume students might want or need. But yeah, because I think there's so many benefits, and I think uh, knowing that there's some good resources out there. I mean that one book in particular that you mentioned, but I think I'm sure there's a lot of folks like yourself out there. If you kind of want to talk shop or at upcoming conferences and events and everything. But I guess is there any other specific like organizations or books or things that like that you'd want to mention that we could like put in the show notes? Because I know like the one book that you mentioned we could definitely put in there, but just anything else that you'd recommend.
Yeah, I don't know, a shameless plug. Kudos to Karen Inkless, Mimi Benjamin, and Jody Jessup Anger. This book was just released. I received my copy last week and started reading it. This is a great resource if you want to understand how do you not just create but maintain and sustain intentionally designed and successful living learning communities. Strongly advise folks to take advantage of that resource. Get involved. Whether it's a community of practice, uh, which you know I love communities of practice because it allows peers to come together at different institutions to basically talk shop. What's happening on your campus? How are you navigating different challenges or problems? Oftentimes when we attend conferences, we're sharing some of the similar challenges. With not just creating, establishing living learning communities. So if you're not able to attend a conference, whether it's academic initiatives through a Kuhu I, the Residential College Symposium, um, the National Learning Communities Conference organization as well. These are great resources. Folks are digitally engaged and often sharing resources and best practices. That I think could be super relevant and helpful as folks work to establish and evolve their programs on their campus. Um, I constantly, receive, articles or look for articles quite often, or attend conferences where I can connect with peers to see what they're doing, what challenges that they're facing, and kind of get a pulse of what they're experiencing, whether it's successes or challenges, and just to kind of make sure that we are looking at things intentionally here at NC State as well. Lots and lots of resources out there. But I think most important of all is on your campus, establishing, not just establishing relationships with campus partners in academic affairs or your colleges on campus, admissions, advising, parents and family services. Those folks need to be at the table. If living learning communities on your campus have been long standing, or whether you're looking to start these programs on your campus, you need a very diverse group of thought leaders on your campus to kind of help establish these programs for the benefit of students. And oftentimes, as I mentioned earlier, these are tied to student success outcomes for the institution. Again, university strategic plans. Here at NC State University, I'm part of the QEP Quality Enhancement Plan implementation team for high impact experiences, offering my insight on living learning communities, here on my campus. So get involved. These programs cannot be established again in a vacuum. Take advantage of the resources, whether they're on your campus or literature or connecting with folks at other institutions.
Good advice. Yeah, I mean both sort of local and kind of global connections, and the book like you mentioned too sounds really great. And I think all really important stuff, because I think you can obviously start trying to build those foundations at your institution, and then kind of check over your shoulder with other folks in the field to kind of like troubleshoot things, and yeah, just make sure you're kind of doing your homework and doing the reading and doing all that stuff to kind of know that sort of more formal sort of understanding of everything as well. So yeah, just really appreciate your time, sort of giving us sort of the crash course here and sharing some great perspectives and resources and things and what ways to connect with you and keep the conversation going if folks are interested. But yeah, just thank you so much for your time and all that you shared.
Thank you, Dustin. It was great to be with you, and hopefully, what I shared is beneficial to your audience.